right, today I figured that we would do another vlog style video. Just since I got back from Ragbrai a couple days ago, I've just been recovering after a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of sleeping in tents and eating vendor food. So I wanted to give my body a couple of days to recover. And I just wanted to ease into the transition of recording again and doing outlines and whatnot. And the vlog helps me to do a looser kind of format. And I figured that today we would talk about the experience that I had in Ragbri, because I think that I can tie it just to a few philosophical themes that I sort of experienced while I was out there. Because originally my plan, now if you don't know what Ragbri is, it's a bike ride across Iowa. It's about 400 miles if you just do the regular route. And then for this one on day 5, they had a 100-mile century ride, an optional century ride that you could do. So you're talking about about 400 miles or so over the course of 6 days or so. So it's a lot of bike riding. It's a lot of energy, even if you really train for it. And I trained about 1,000 miles before I went on Ragbrai, and it was still pretty difficult to finish at some point. I ended up doing the optional century ride as well, just because, honestly, because the people I was doing it with were doing it, and I didn't want to be the only one left out. But I ultimately was happy that I did it. In fact, I got the patch right here. That's the patch for the century ride. So there's the proof that I did it. But I was actually glad that I ended up doing it, because it kind of really pushed me to a place where I didn't think I would. I sort of surprised myself. I was surprised that I could push my body to that limit, because the days before the century ride were kind of brutal. We had 2 days where the heat index, like the feeling of the heat, was above 100, and I think at one point it was above 110. And the first 2 days had a lot of rolling hills as well on top of it, like really steep, long hills that were really difficult to get over. And then after those 2 days, you had 2 60-mile days where you were still trying to recover from the first 2 brutal days. And those were a little bit better. And then you had the 5th day, which was the 100-miler. And the first 3 days of the ride, I didn't really get good sleep either. So I was kind of all over the place. But I was glad that I did the century ride, because I kind of pushed my body to a place where I guess I wasn't sure I could go. I mean, there was a part of me that said, okay, you're going to get through this pretty much no matter what. And I was praying a lot to get through it. And it helped me to sort of deepen my dependence on God in those moments. But once I had gotten through it, I was sort of surprised that I had. I didn't think, in one sense, you don't expect your body to be capable of doing that. Or at least I hadn't been expecting my body to be capable of doing that. And it was 30 plus miles more than I had ever, no, 35 plus miles than I had ever done up until that point. And after 4 days of consistent hard riding. So I was glad, because it kind of showed you something. But nonetheless, it was a lot. Now, the other thing that I was supposed to do, and the main thing I wanted to talk about here, because the other thing I'm not supposed to do, the thing I wanted to do out there on a Ragbri was to preach. I wanted to be able to get off of the bicycle at the end of the day and go to the downtown vendor area and just preach the gospel in sort of the same way that I do out here, and that in an inviting way, give out Bibles and crosses and just be open to be willing to talk about God and Jesus with people. And I was not able to do that, which was a letdown for me, and in some sense embarrassing, because I had talked about doing that, right? I had talked to a lot of people about the fact that I was going to go on Ragbri and preach. And I didn't do that. I didn't do it at all. And the major reason why I didn't do it was because, on the one hand, I was so tired at the end of these rides. Even with the training that I didn't have the spare energy, I guess, to do it at the end. And also logistically, it was so difficult, because you would get to the end camp, and I think the earliest I got there on these days was probably 2 o'clock or something like that. And then you'd have to eat and shower, set up your tent, rest enough to feel recovered, and then really try to get to sleep by 8 o'clock because you were going to, or at least I had to get up early. I had to get up around like 4:30 or so in order to be ready to leave at 6. And getting up that early in order to break down your tent, change into the clothes that you need, get some water and food in you, go to the bathroom before you head off to the next town. And so it was so time consuming and exhausting to both do the ride and then get everything set up in order to go to sleep on time so that you can get up early enough to go. And by the time you did all that, you wouldn't have very much time left. And then you still have to get yourself to the vendor area or the downtown, because it's not like that area is right next to the downtown. In fact, I think the only time in which we were relatively close to the vendor area was I want to say the second to last day. And so logistically, it was very difficult to do it. And physically, I was pretty exhausted from the riding. And I was sort of disappointed in myself. I was kind of almost beating myself up at certain points about it, because I thought, well, I should be able to do this, right? And like I should, have the capacity to do this. And I don't, right? Therefore, I'm failing in some way. Therefore, I'm messing up in some way. And therefore, I'm not living up to what I'm supposed to be doing as somebody called to evangelism. And these are thoughts that I've had in relation to other things that I'm doing with my life, like this YouTube channel, or my writing, even getting prepared for Ragbrai. I have really stretched myself in so many different directions all at once, trying to do a lot of different things all at once, like trying to do the evangelism and write a book and work and do this YouTube channel and volunteer at my church and spend time with my wife and have the time to be able to do the basic maintenance of life, and trying to pursue this all at once, while also on the side here trying to read books, trying to read the Bible, trying to read some devotionals. For the past, I want to say perhaps the past 4 months or so, I felt really stretched, especially ever since I started training for Ragbri, and Ragbri itself took so much time in order to train for, that I was taking on so much and feeling that I should be able to accomplish all that, but really struggling with. And before Ragbri, I had these plans to, fill up my time even more afterwards with other things. But the experience that I had on Ragbri, one of the things about riding for miles and miles is that you get time to think a little bit, at least at the beginning. And some of the things that I thought about on there was, what is God trying to show me through this experience, right? Because I think if God wanted to, he could enable me to preach, right? He could have enabled me to, do the things that I was trying to do out there. And the fact that I didn't preach, tells me that God was trying to tell me something or show me something. And what I think he was trying to show me was just this kind of a bit of humility, and humility in the sense of being realistic about, I suppose, my own limitations or my own level of growth. Like, there may be a day years down the line in which I could go to Ragbrai after training properly and preach at towns, because I knew because I would know what I'm getting myself into. And I would have trained specifically for that. And I would have a plan. But going into Ragbrai, not really knowing what it involves, or really just, having an idea of it, but not knowing what it would actually feel like and what the logistics would be like, what I would need and what I wouldn't, and, what kind of time I would actually have, and how I would have to plan about going about the day. I mean, I didn't know any of that going in, but I had this sort of brash confidence that, like, yeah, I could ride my bicycle across Iowa in this festival and definitely have the time and the energy to preach. And there wasn't any sort of question as to, okay, are you really going to be capable of doing that? And I think it's a similar. So I think I needed a dose of humility, right? I needed a dose of humility of something like, maybe someday you could do something like that, but you have to start small and then build your way, right? Trying to do something so big like that, without knowing what you're getting yourself into, without the training involved, is really a recipe for failure. And it also had me reflecting on the passages in the Bible that talk about wasted words, right? And I had to ask myself, because again, I had gone out and told people that I was going to go preach, and this is something that's happened before in my life where I have plans for something, right? And I go out and tell people that I'm going to be doing this or I'm going to be doing that, before I've actually done it. And then I'm not able to, for one reason or another, right? Something comes in the way. And then I have to go back and tell people, well, I couldn't actually do that, right? Now, sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't, right? And I think one of the things that God was teaching me there is the whole wasted words thing, right? The sense of, I really need to consider whether or not I can do what I'm setting out to do and how likely it is to come about. And I shouldn't be couching my words in terms of, yes, I'm absolutely going to do this thing, but I don't know. I'm trying to pursue this and I'll see what happens, but I am not ultimately in control of how my life works out, right? Or what's going to get in my way, or which way God is going to direct me, right? If I go out and I tell people with this, sense of certainty before anything that has happened, I'm definitely going to do this thing. And then I go out there, and I counter obstacles. I encounter things that get in the way. I encounter my own limitations, right? This is I think in a way reminding me that I'm not in control. I'm not in control of what I'm going to do in the future. I'm not in control of the way that my life is going to work out. I'm not in control over, whether I'm going to be successful going out preaching on Ragbri or not. And I shouldn't speak in a way that assumes that kind of control, because I'm not in control. God's in control when it comes to the course of my life, when it comes to what I'm going to do and not to do. And I can try to explore the paths that are open to me, and I can try to follow the open doors that God's putting in front of me. But ultimately, I have no control over that. And in fact, I don't want control over it. I want God to have control over it, because what I think is going to be good for me or good for other people pales in comparison to the wisdom that God has about those things. And so I think part of the lesson was learning the humility about even just the language, the way I'm talking about my future plans with the people around me. I shouldn't be talking about it in terms of absolutes, but in terms of, well, this is what I'm going to try to do, and we'll see what God does. And I think that that's more realistic. And, tying it back to all the stuff I'm trying to do all at once, and that feeling of being overwhelmed and disappointed, right? One of the things I did recently, well, in the past few months, was do this checklist kind of thing where I have floors, targets, and ceilings for the different kinds of activities that I try to do every day. And the reason I made this system of floors, targets, and ceilings was because I was in this mode of trying to do so much, right? An hour of Bible reading, an hour of prayer, an hour of writing, an hour of video work, whatever it was. I was trying to put so much, right? And even if I did the majority of it, I would feel disappointed because I hadn't accomplished the goal that I set out. And this has been a part, this has been a pattern in my life where when I start something, I start it at, I'm trying almost to start it at the maximum. And if I can't sustain the maximum, over the long term, then I failed. right, then something has gone wrong. I haven't lived up to what I could do, right? And a few months ago, I had to take a step back because I was just seeing this pattern of an explosion of work and then a burnout that it could last a month depending on where it went. This burnout, another explosion of work, burnout, explosion, burnout. And it was really getting in the way of having this consistent kind of productivity. And I had to take a step back and go, okay, well, I had to be humble and I had to say, okay, I cannot do this level of work every day. Even if maybe my heart, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak when it comes to this level of work. I can't do hours and hours and hours of this every day, plus go to my job, plus try to maintain my relationship, plus try to do the basic maintenance of my life. I need to dial this down to the smallest amount that I can think of, something that is ridiculously easy for me to do. All right. And I played with a few different kinds of plans with essentially the idea was that the goal for that day, whatever it was, whether it was reading or devotionals or whatever, it would be 5 minutes instead of an hour. Because to me, 5 minutes was nothing. I could do 5 minutes of anything. And so I played with a couple different versions of this. Ultimately, I landed, after doing some looking into it, I landed on this floor target ceiling system because it kind of gives you more freedom and flexibility on what you're going to do that day. Some days, on the ceilings here, I have like a lot of my ceilings are around 30 to 60 minutes, meaning that on days where I feel like I have a lot of energy, I feel productive, I feel ready to go, I can still do an hour of reading or writing or whatever, that day, if I've got the motivation to do it. But some days, you're so bogged down, you've got so much to do, or you're just so drained for whatever reason, that all I could muster is 5 minutes, right? But every day, my goal is the minimum of 5 minutes. And then everything after that is extra. And some days I do way more than, my ceiling or whatever. And some days I only hit the floor. But every single day, I'm able to be consistent with my work, right? So I had to bring this attempt to live out, I guess, maybe this maximum or this ideal version of work and make it actually sustainable, and humble myself and say, listen, you cannot consistently and sustainably do this maximum level of work all the time. You have to bring it down to what you can actually sustain from day to day if you're going to do anything that is consistent or reliable. And so I realized that when it came to the daily habits I wanted to incorporate in my life, but I still struggle with the other goals, right? The long-term goals. I'm always, when I'm thinking about like the things that I want to accomplish, I'm usually thinking about them in big, ideal, fantastic ways, right? Rather than, I guess you could say, more realistic ways. And I don't want to, on the one hand, I don't want to get rid of the ideal. I don't want to get rid of the idea that I could do something. I could, write a book and street preach and run groups at my church and have a thriving relationship and have all my basic maintenance stuff covered and do this YouTube channel and have it explode. Like, I don't want to get rid of this fire to express myself creatively and pursue the things that I think God is leading me into, on the one hand. But on the other hand, I have to have enough humility to recognize that I'm only one human being with only a certain limited amount of time and resources and energy. And the more I give myself, the more I'm spread thin. And it's the similar kind of, I'm reaching for a maximum right away. I'm reaching for the ideal right away and saying, if I can't write a book, run a YouTube channel, have a good relationship, do all the things I'm trying to do at maximum all the time and be progressing towards that, then I've failed. Then I haven't lived up to what, whatever God is calling me to do. And I should be able to. And if I'm not, then like I said, I'm failing. And I think the Ragbri ride helped me to confront my own limitations a little bit more and really start to think about it and start to think, okay, we actually kind of need to do the opposite of what we've been doing, which isn't to say that we can't have these goals of like writing a book, whatever, the big goals, right? It's not that we can't have the big goals, but we need to be realistic about those goals, meaning we need to have a realistic time horizon in terms of, whether it's going to be successful or how long it's going to take. And we need to prioritize and consolidate the kinds of goals that we're going after. So, things that are of high priority to me are like these habits that I follow every day. Writing this book that I would like to finish, doing this YouTube channel, and the street preaching. And I can do all of those things, and sustain, the basics. I can do that. And I've gotten to the point where I can do that. I've grown enough to where I can sustain that level of activity. And the other stuff like running the church groups or trying to, street preach every single day, or trying to, write for 2 hours every single day. I mean, these things need to be scaled back into, or like, trying to get a video out every other day or every 3 days or something like that. That all needs to be scaled back to something that can be sustainable, something that I can do, that isn't going to burn me out. And that's going to take a little bit of experimentation, as any process of authentic exploration does. But I need to scale back and look at the basics of what I can do reliably and sustainably, consolidate that, stick to that for a while, maybe 6 months or a year. And then once those things become routine, once those things become sort of easy, then take a step back and say, okay, is there something else I can do on top of this? Or is this the limit of, and kind of just stay where I stay with the things that are most important to me, right? The most important things to me are when it comes to, public facing stuff, is the writing, the YouTube, in the street preaching. If I just did those 3 things for the rest of my life, I would be perfectly happy with that. And maybe someday, this is successful enough to where I could do it full time, and I won't have to work, right? Or, maybe something will come up where it could be my job, right? Maybe a position at the church opens up where something like, street evangelism could be a job. And then it would take less time because that activity would actually, pay for the basics, right? But really in the whole of my life, I think I need to have the humility to scale back. I need to have the humility to say, okay, what can I actually realistically accomplish day to day, month to month? Instead of starting at the maximum, instead of starting at the ideal, instead of trying to, fill up every single hour of my life with sort of maximum productivity. And, I don't know, some people have this criticism that mindset of being, maximally productive is just like this holdover of a capitalistic society. And maybe they're right. I don't know. I think it depends on really who you are. I think for me, there are a lot of things that I really would like to do. And if I had the time and the energy and the resources to do all the things that come to my mind to do, then I would love to be doing them, rather than, other things, I guess more, relaxing activity, because I find a lot of fulfillment and joy in these kinds of things, even if they're difficult or even if they're exhausting at certain points. So for me, at the very least, I don't think this, sense of being productive has anything to do with like cultural pressure or societal constraints. It's not like any of the things that I'm doing really make money in and of themselves. They're just pursuits that I find meaningful, and that I think can be helpful to other people as well. And it's not a holdover from childhood either. I mean, I don't have a problem. Let's say I don't have a problem relaxing, if that makes sense. There are plenty of days when I just take the day, and again, the more I've pushed myself, the more I've recognized that need for rest, right? So, for instance, going forward, I'm trying to keep Sundays as a complete rest day. But besides going to church, which itself can be restorative, but besides going to church, I'm not doing anything on those days. I'm not preaching on Sunday I'm not doing the street evangelism on Sunday like I was doing. I'm like keep that maybe Friday, Saturday, which I think actually might be more effective for inviting people to church anyway. But, having that rest on Sundays, keeping my day off on Wednesdays, for example, but scaling back this ideal and scaling back this attempt to do the maximum and not completely closing myself off to it, allowing God to order, allowing God to open the doors, as he sees fit. But there's been this tendency for me to just try to force everything that I want to do and just force myself to endure this high level of work and stress in order to try to accomplish all the things that I want to do, to the point where sometimes it's not even enjoyable to do these things that give me meaning sometimes, because I associate with that kind of stress or obligation or the need to do something. And so not having to train for Ragbrai anymore is helpful, because it gives me hours and hours of my week back. And the temptation for me is to fill those hours with something new. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fill those hours with something new. I'm going to try to scale back, consolidate, focus on the things that bring me the most meaning, and just work on those until they're easy or something else happens, right? But I'm going to stop trying to continue to add things to my agenda, continue to add things to my list. And I'm going to stop talking about the future like it is already settled, especially my future, because it's really just not accurate, right? And I think I end up embarrassing myself when I do that. When I say, oh, I'm going to preach on Ragbrai, and then I don't do it at all. Now I got to go, tell people I didn't actually do that. And, there's something to be said, of course, of like, who cares what other people think? But also, I could just avoid all that by being more, really just being more truthful about the future prospects of anything, which is that they aren't set in stone and that they're not up to me, and I don't get to decide what the future looks like. I can only try to pursue the things that I find meaningful, and God will make of it what he will. But the fact that I was not able to do the preaching, I think God was using to humble me a little bit and to make me check and consider what I say and what I put on my plate, and to be more realistic about that. And it's kind of disappointing, because like I did do this bike ride across Iowa. I did do this 100-mile day. I did this very physically demanding thing that took a lot of endurance, and I trained for months for it, and yet I don't feel accomplished about Ragbrai, because I set this expectation that the goal wasn't just to finish Ragbrai, but to finish Ragbrai and preach at the towns along the way. And so now I have this almost this kind of disappointment about the ride, not because I didn't finish the ride, but because I didn't preach. And, that's not a great feeling either. I want to have that feeling of accomplishment. And I think when you set yourself unrealistic goals, especially if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, you suffer from that feeling of disappointment, even if you did something great, right? Even if you did something that would most people don't do. I had that experience. That reminds me of the just as another example of this was when I was 23, 24, I said, oh, I'm going to go walk across the country. And I didn't. I ran into trouble. I ran out of money, and I had to bail on walking. And what I ended up doing was still pretty significant, because I walked from Salem, Massachusetts to Dayton, Ohio. It was 700 plus miles. And that wasn't walking across the country, but it was still much more than most people do. And it was actually a really good experience in a lot of ways. But when I reflect on that, I don't feel a sense of accomplishment. I feel a sense of disappointment, because I set the goal of walking across the country. And that's a repeated experience that I have. And I really want to stop feeling that disappointment. I want to stop feeling that sense of failure, because I didn't reach the goal that I set out for myself. But to set for myself realistic goals means to be humble, right? To be humble and to think about, okay, what can I realistically accomplish and sustain? For sure. right? And so anyway, the lesson that I really got from Ragbri was a sense of humility, the sense of thinking over what I'm saying to other people about what I'm actually going to do, having humility in that, saying, I really don't know the future. I really don't know what I could achieve here, but I'm going to see what God allows me to do. And just setting my workload to what I could realistically sustain over the long term. Those are the major lessons that I think I learned during Ragbri. But, just as a quick reflection, I think I did for the most part enjoy Ragbri. There were definitely lots of parts I didn't like. Most of the writing was okay. I'm not a huge fan of the Iowan landscape. It's a lot of corn and soybean. Some of it's very pretty, but I'm from New England and I'm always nostalgic for that kind of landscape. So much of the writing was not all that great, but I still had a good time stopping over in a lot of the towns in Iowa. The people in Iowa are exceptionally friendly and welcoming. A lot of the food vendors are really good. A lot of the campsites were fine. And so it was a good experience overall. I do wish I would have done it when I was younger, because I feel like it would have been less difficult. And it would have been nice to have a friend there or two that I knew very closely. So I recommend that if you're going to do Ragbri in the first place, train for it. 100% train for it, and train for hills, because that's probably the most brutal part. You can get over hills easily, then you're going to be fine. I trained for 1,000 miles and that beforehand, and that was really still not enough. So I would recommend maybe like 1,200, 1,300 miles. Train back-to-back consistent days, like train 5 days in a row and then take 2 days off, rather than like 2 inconsistent days off, because you want to get used to that feeling of accumulated fatigue. And find hills to train on, because that's definitely the worst part. And go out when it's hot, because you want to get used to the heat. Ideally, when you're on the ride, go early. As soon as the trail opens, I think at 6 o'clock, that's when we were on the trail, because you wanted as much of the day in the cool as possible. You don't want to be lingering around waiting for the heat to come, the humidity to come. But train in the heat, train back to back, train on hills. I would say at least 1,300 miles. Start early. Like if you're going to go do Ragbri, start training 6 months before, and get in as many miles as you can. Get at least one long day of 70 miles or more. Because the more you train, the more your experience is going to be good. Because the worst part of the experience was how exhausted I felt after each day, which limited my ability to go enjoy like downtown, enjoy the vendors, these kinds of things, and go with people, right? Go with people that you know and that you're close to. Because I think that's probably the majority of where the fun goes at. So, but anyway, if you made it to the end of the video here, I really appreciate you listening. Like I said, this is just a vlog video to get me back in the habit of recording. So we will be picking up some new videos going forward. I think I'm going to do my next video on the relationship between parenting in the state, parenting in government, because I believe that's the last actual video that we left off on. But again, if you made it to the end of the video here, thank you so much for watching. If you think somebody else would find this video helpful, then please share it with them. If you like this video, please give it a like. And if you'd like more videos like this, then please subscribe. And as always, thank you guys for listening.